European leaders on Thursday backed plans to spend more on defense and continue to stand by Ukraine in a world upended by Donald Trump's reversal of U.S. policies. The European Union's defense summit in Brussels took place amid fears that Russia, emboldened by its war in Ukraine, may attack an EU country next, and that Europe can no longer rely on the US to come to its aid. Today we have shown that the European Union is rising to the challenge, building the Europe of defense and standing with Ukraine shoulder to shoulder, the chairman of the meeting, Antonio Costa, told reporters. EU leaders hailed the European Commission's proposal this week to give them fiscal flexibility on defense spending and to jointly borrow up to €150 billion to lend the EU governments to spend on their own militaries. In a joint statement agreed to by all 27 member states, the leaders called on their ministers to examine these proposals in detail urgently. Europe must take up this challenge, this arms race, and we must win it, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said at the Special Defense Summit in Brussels. Europe as a whole is truly capable of winning any military, financial, economic confrontation with Russia. We are simply stronger, Tusk said. French President Emmanuel Macron, who on Wednesday had told French voters that Russia was a threat to France and Europe, said all this was just a first step. Whatever happens in Ukraine, we need to build autonomous defense capabilities in Europe, he said after the UE summit. The EU leaders also voiced support for Ukraine, but that statement was agreed with without Hungary's nationalist leader Viktor Orban, a Trump ally, who is also cultivating ties with Moscow. In their statement, the 26 other EU members stressed that there can be no negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine, and vowed to continue to give it aid, according to the recent draft. We are here to defend Ukraine, Costa says, as he and the European Commission chief Ursula von der Leyen, both smiling broadly, warmly welcomed Ukrainian President Zelensky to the summit, in sharp contrast with the clash between Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office last week. But decades of reliance on U.S. protection, divergences of funding, on how France's nuclear deterrence could be used for Europe showed how difficult it would be for the EU to fill the void left by Washington after it froze military aid to Ukraine. Washington provided more than 40% of the military aid to Ukraine last year, according to NATO, some of which Europe could not easily replace. Some leaders still held out hope, in public at least, that Washington could be coaxed back into the fold. We must ensure with cool and wise heads that U.S. support is also guaranteed in the coming months and years, because Ukraine is also dependent on their support for defense, Germany's outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz said. Macron said that leaders backed Zelensky's call for them to support the idea of a truce between Russia and Ukrainian forces in the air and at sea. Zelensky told EU leaders such a truce would be a chance to test Moscow's will to end its 3-year invasion. So Zelensky's saying he's open to a truce, and it'll be a test because he's saying he's willing to show a truce. But can we really see Putin stop all attacking 100% in a supposed truce? And what about nuclear deterrence? In a sign of gravity of the moment, Macron has said that France was open to discussing extending the protection offered by its nuclear arsenal to its European partners. This was met with cautiously positive reactions. Some, like Lithuania's president, Gitanas Nausėda, said such an nuclear umbrella, would serve as a reality very serious deterrent towards Russia. Poland said the idea was worth discussing, while some, like the Czechs, stressed the need to keep the U.S. involved. Trump has said Europe must take more responsibility for its security. On Thursday, he cast doubt on his willingness to defend NATO's allies, saying that he would not do so if they are not paying enough on their own defense. His decision to shift from staunch U.S. support for Ukraine to a more conciliatory stance towards Moscow has deeply alarmed Europeans who see Russia as the biggest threat. Underlying the level of concern, the parties aiming to form Germany's next government on Tuesday agreed to lift constitutional limits on borrowing to fund defense spending. Elsewhere in Europe, Norway will more than double its financial pledge to Ukraine this year, while also hiking its own defense spending, the Prime Minister said.